Well, like. Now, I think about maybe a year ago or something, I made a video very similar to this in terms of like the thumbnail that will come out after the fact. And it actually got a bit more views than I'm used to when it comes to speaking on certain subjects, such as critical race theory. It's a bugbear of mine. It's no secret because for whatever reason, anti-racism, critical race theory, just I don't know. For some weird reason, the views never really reaches the heights that it should. You know. That said, something that I came across earlier on the day, which came out a few months ago, that I obviously just missed because I think since it was like the beginning of November or something, that was in the midst of my fucking internet bender that was taking place. So I obviously missed it. That said, I'm going to just show the article, show the PDF, show who the woman in question is and what she's done in the past. And, hopefully just a wee thumbnail with this anonymous mask might get some additional views because there's only so much I can fucking do. You could make the argument I'm beating a dead horse, so to speak. But as far as I'm concerned, I just feel that like this is the sort of stuff people should be talking about. Who gives a fuck what the Tories are doing down in Westminster? Who gives a fuck about Elon Musk? What people should be speaking about, as far as I'm concerned, is this sort of stuff because it's your children, it's our children, it's everybody's children, it's our future that's on the line here in terms of like the polluting of our academia. And it's just going completely under the radar. So, just very briefly here, this is the article in question to begin with. Up here. Use Curriculum for Excellence review to embed anti-racist education into every stage. Anti-racist education should not be a bolt-on. It should be presented repeatedly with deepening complexity as pupils progress through school. Okay, this is from Tez the magazine. Regardless, any review of Curriculum for Excellence should clearly examine how anti-racist education is going to be embedded into every stage of the education journey, from primary to secondary and across all sectors, according to a new paper by Professor Rowena Arshad, who is a chair of the Multicultural and Anti-Racist Education and a former head of Moray House School of Education and Sports at the University of Edinburgh. Who else? What else has she done? Yeah. That reminds me of something that came out a couple of years ago. Yeah, this here. Diversity in the teaching profession. Right, this is their latest report from the Scottish Government, of course, 2024, their latest report that came out. But basically, if you just come down here, okay, this is what she was all about just a few years ago. Yeah. Diversity in the teaching profession and education workforce group. Yeah, where's that from? Where's that from? Oh, that's right. Anti-racism and education program, just briefly. And I mean, I obviously showed this. I've showed this in multiple videos in the past, but obviously the anti-racist education program came out post George Floyd, right? And they had 4 subgroups, and one of the subgroups in question was, in fact, diversity in the teaching profession and education workforce, as it says right there. Okay, but going back to this, diversity in the teaching profession and education workforce, a subgroup of the Scottish Government's anti-racism in education programme is taking forward actions aimed at supporting the education sector to meet the target, stemming from recommendations made by Rowena Arshall in her 2018 and 2021 Teaching in a Diverse Scotland report, which aimed at the time that by 2030, 4% of Scottish teachers would identify as being minority ethnic. 4%, bear that in mind. It is expected, following the publication of the 2022 General Census data, that there will be an increase in the percentage of Scotland's population identifying as being from a minority ethnic group. And as such, we anticipate that the 4% target by 2030 will have to be reviewed. Now, why would that be? Why would that be, of course? Oh, that's right, proportionate representation. Okay? So, the insinuation being this was the 2011 census, obviously, Scottish ethnicities, or ethnicities in Scotland, even. The 2011 census found that Scotland's population was 96% white, thus 4% non-white. That's why at the time the target was to have 4% of teachers in Scotland being non-white, BAME, diverse, whatever the fuck you want to call it, right? And then obviously when the 2022 census data starts to sort of trickle out, it'll need to be updated. And until such a time as whatever the new and improved BAME outcome of said census showcases, until such a time as the teaching workforce matches that BAME-wise, then the insinuation is racism, inequality, inequity, etc., etc. You know, it's just remarkable how that works. So until such a time, even if we just exclude the 2022 census for a brief moment here, and we talk about the 2011 census, until such a time as at least 4% of the teaching workforce in Scotland was BAME, then that would suggest inequality, and that would justify them when their never-ending pushes to continue to prioritise BAMEs, getting them into these positions. The accusation being it's racism, etc. Anyway, so that brings me back to the paper in question. So it says here that she says the anti-immigration riots incited by the far right in the UK in the summer of 2024 were a reminder of the continued need to address issues related to race. But in the paper, Anti-Racist Education, What's Next for Scotland, she says that if there is no mandatory requirement to include curriculum content that assists learners to understand issues of racism and other forms of inequalities, then practice will remain ad hoc and with those already engaged in explicit anti-discriminatory education. She presented her paper as part of the British Educational Resource Association's presidential seminar series, and she says that the extent to which pupils in Scotland learn about racism and discrimination remains dependent on the commitment of individual teachers or schools. Anti-racism as a concept needs to be presented repeatedly with deepening complexity and applications as pupils progress through school, while any curriculum reform should audit areas of strength and weakness. So this is the paper in question. This is again from November. Anti-racism in education. Actions for next steps. Learning from research, policy, and practice. And if we just come to here, this was her paper at the time. So obviously I'm not going to go through all this, but and of course, it's just every fucking time I talk about this subject, there she is, Melina Valdineri. There's no smoke without fire. There really isn't. Regardless, she's just everywhere. But anyway, the anti-immigration riots incited by the far right in the UK of summer 2024 remind us of the continued need to address issues related to race. The term race is highly problematic. There is no biological basis for race, and this is why some authors place the word race in inverted commas. It is nevertheless a term that is enshrined in law, such as the UK Equality Act, and is often used as a shorthand term to capture discussions related to different ethnicities, cultures, colours, and languages. This paper will use inverted commas unless quoting others. Following resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, there were growing calls, particularly from those of racially minoritized backgrounds, for schools, colleges, and universities to teach Black history to better reflect the contributions of Black and minority ethnic communities and to decolonize the curriculum. Decolonizing the curriculum is an approach involving a critical analysis of how colonial forms of knowledge, pedagogical strategies, and research methodologies have shaped what we know. what we recognise, and how we reward such knowledge accordingly. Across the UK, Wales became the first UK nation to agree to making the teaching of black and minority ethnic histories mandatory in the new curriculum for Wales. The response from the Westminster government indicated that the national curriculum framework in England already provided scope and flexibility of the black history and the inclusion of culturally diverse curriculum content. A similar response was made in relation to the Northern Irish national curriculum. And here in Rainbow Unicorn Land, of course, in 2020, the Scottish Government, or Rainbow Unicorn Government, responding to demands from the black and minority ethnic young people, indicated that the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence, with its flexible framework, already provided opportunities for such learning. However, the government here in Rainbow Unicorn Land recognised the delivery of such teaching was not necessarily consistently experienced by all pupils. As a consequence of such, in 2021, it set up the Anti-Racism in Education programme, where a review would be carried out of the curriculum, of course, to embed anti-racist practice and learning. It remains to be seen, once the review is concluded, whether the teaching of black history will be mandatory rather than dependent on the commitment of individual teachers or schools. Bear in mind, this all came on the back of George fucking Floyd, okay? This set the ball in motion. That paved the way to this BS, and these people are nothing short of opportunistic, malevolent grifters, and of course, critical race theorists to boot, okay? That's all this is. George Floyd dies in America? Well, hey, it just so happens we've got the solution to that fucking problem. Let's start to pollute and update and corrupt Scottish academia. Under the guise, of course, of anti-racism. Oh, yeah. But what we're really talking about here is power dynamics. What we're really talking about here is critical race theory, etc. White privilege, white supremacy, power dynamics. Are we ready for anti-racist education? Education Scotland, the lead body ensuring quality and improvement in education, now offers professional learning that supports the development of anti-racist practice for all levels of teachers. Education Scotland understands anti-racist education to describe learning that works proactively to prevent and challenge racism that exists within our society. The Building Racial Literacy Programme, which is a Scottish Government-funded critical race theory programme, with Melina Valdineri being the main frontrunner of said project, funded by the Scottish Government, offers depth learning to enable teachers and other educators, such as community education staff, to improve their racial literacy, critical race theory, and to move from theory to action. Right, and bear in mind, of course, the way that these people continuously speak. Enable teachers, okay, so they need to re-educate teachers, okay, so teachers become re-educated. They shape their worldview, their new and improved way of looking at the world through a critical race theorist framework, okay, or a lens even. And what do they do in turn, consequently? Yeah, that's right. They then in turn take that bullshit into the classroom and target your children, such as community education staff, to improve their racial literacy and to move from theory to action by developing anti-racist action plans that can be implemented within their own setting. To date, over 392 educators have completed the programme, most of whom, by the way, we will never know who they are, right? They're very good at that, keeping it on the down low. With another 300 expected to complete by the summer of 2025. In 2024, groundwork is being laid to develop an education system that can systematically acknowledge and understand race matters. There is a move away from viewing racism as irrational and deviant acts from single individuals to an understanding that race is connected to wider issues of power. Critical race theory. So no longer it's just seeing other groups of people as beneath you or as subordinate. No, it's about power dynamics. It's about disparities. It's about fucking societal structures, right? It's critical race theory. Okay, and again, if they manage to sort of get this BS into the education system, which they're already in the process of doing, as I said earlier on, it in turn, by extension, means that in time, the youth become corrupted and are brainwashed and propagandized by this fucking crap. And that's the point. This is why I get so angry about it when I keep talking about it. You know what I mean? And here we go. The Building Racial Literacy Programme established in 2021 is unique in the UK and worth attention, apparently, with the aim of the programme being developed using an iterative proof of concept approach involving a testing model and then reviewing, following feedback. The programme consists of 5 sessions with support to participants given by staff experienced in race equality and anti-racist education. The programme pays particular attention to issues of educator confidence, identity, and provides support spaces specifically for BAMEs to explore their experiences and also for whitey or white participants who are often at the start of their journey of race equity, no longer equality, equity. It explicitly challenges participants to engage with concepts like critical race theory and white privilege, not shying away from discussions of power, privilege, and positionality. Participants are assisted to contextualize race with an understanding of colonialism, structural inequalities, and institutional discrimination. The program aims to enable participants to see beyond the personal to becoming co-activists and leaders of change. We're talking about teachers here. So teachers participate in said program. They then in turn take the bullshit that they learn in said program into their fucking classrooms. It's just mental. I don't know. The groundwork is now being put in place in Scottish education via policy to embed race into systems such as annual monitoring and analysis of the diversity of the teaching workforce. Huge investment has gone into professional learning to improve racial literacy, critical race theory, and confidence of educators, providing initial teaching education. Those moving into senior education leadership roles, and for those working on the ground with learners at all levels. There are now frameworks in place for employers to put in place steps to improve the diversity of the education workforce, such as the recent General Teaching Council for Scotland report on sponsoring mentioned earlier. The anti-racist framework for initial teaching education provides the development of anti-racist curriculum outlined in the document Breaking the Mold. Breaking the Mold sets out expectations and ambitions that broader curriculum reform should engage with. There are 17 principles which span preparing learners to become critical global citizens, which include Scotland's role in historical world events such as slavery, of course, and their continued impact to learning the difference between individual and systemic racism. The principles also cover having a commitment to developing a high level of racial literacy in educational professionals, and to co-designing of a curriculum that takes learners' lives and experiences as a starting point. The principles fed into a national discussion on education submitted to the government and the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities, with the final report on the national discussion being extensive. And the danger is that anti-racist education will become lost once again if the material was read by policymakers and power holders who do not quite get it on matters of race, thereby deprioritizing said issues. Oh my God. Difficult and complex areas such as discussion of whiteness, including white privilege and fragility, as well as the concept of intersectionality, need to be engaged with. As part of a core and compulsory curriculum, there needs to be time dedicated to the consideration of the multifaceted complexities of racism, critical race theory, and critical whiteness studies, which can play a role in offering those in teaching preparation different perspectives to draw from. Unless white hegemonic norms are disrupted, then dominant narratives will remain. The challenge remains then, to conclude, of how to ensure consistency so that all learners in Scottish education experience a curriculum content that will address issues of representation, assist learners to sift through competing perspectives, and to develop well-rounded views about difference. A subset to said challenge is to ensure that this is done as a whole school establishment approach to avoid tokenism or bolt-on approaches. As was acknowledged by the then Deputy First Minister for Scotland in his response to the demands for the inclusion of Black history in anti-racist education, some young people in schools will not be experiencing responsible and respectful teaching of Black history. If there is no mandatory requirement to include curriculum content that assists learners to understand issues of racism and other forms of inequalities, any curriculum review should clearly examine how anti-racist education is going to be embedded in every stage of the educational journey, from primary school, to secondary and across all sectors. Early years, nursery, and higher education. Every theme within the curriculum for excellence and across subject areas needs to play its part so schools can deliver a spiral curriculum where anti-racism as a concept is presented repeatedly with deepening complexity and applications. Oh my God, man. Honest to fuck. So, the effectiveness of anti-racist education in Scottish education will depend on those who develop policy and practice for education being prepared to understand how knowledge production has been shaped by colonialism and how this continues to be maintained through coloniality. Okay? Critics of anti-racist education and critical race theory have called these initiatives woke, labeling educators as the thought police. Such criticism disempowers teachers to teach in a progressive way. Decolonizing the curriculum is not about erasing history, but engaging what Haitian historian Michael Roth, whatever, would suggest being the recognition of how colonial power dynamics have influenced the production of historical narratives, which has then shaped the collective memory of societies. Okay? And bear in mind, as I say, right, this boot, right, is one of many who sits on Scottish government fucking panels with the sole intention being to redefine, redesign, modify, corrupt, and pollute our academia, all under the guise of anti-racism. When the real proof of the matter is here that this is nothing short of fucking cancer, it's critical race theory, and it's happening right under your nose. Anyway, that's enough from me. And until next time, me.